energy charging points in our road infrastructure, and just at the end of last week I announced that the National Wealth Fund will now play a more important role in funding and supporting investments in our defence sector, which is going to be even more important in the years ahead.
Lee Anderson.
I recently visited a business in Kirkby-in-Ashfield in the East Midlands. Funnily enough, I didn't see the honourable member for Strangford at the time, but this business told me that the increase in national insurance contributions is going to cost them £240,000 a year, which will stop them recruiting people and giving their employees a pay rise next year. So does the Chancellor agree with me? It's time to reverse this ridiculous decision and help drive growth in the East Midlands.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In the budget in October, I had to fill the £22 billion black hole left by the previous government. But there are huge opportunities to grow the economy in the East Midlands. We've recently agreed the £9 billion Unity deal with Rolls-Royce to support the Royal Navy submarine fleet. This is a major boost for economic growth in the East Midlands, creating and maintaining 5,000 long-term jobs. Good for our country's security, good for the people of the East Midlands.
Monica Harding.
Question 3, please, Mr Speaker.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to answer this question together with question number 20. The Government has taken difficult decisions to repair the public finances, to fund public services and to restore economic stability. The OBR expects the employer national insurance contribution changes will reduce the level of potential output by 0.1% at the forecast horizon. The OBR forecasts growth to pick up next year and living standards to grow faster during this Parliament than the previous one. In the long term, the OBR expects the autumn budget policies, if sustained, to permanently increase the size of the economy.
Monica Harding.
Mr Speaker, my constituent Alison runs Stepping Stones Nursery, which has been operating in my constituency of East Midlands for 30 years, offering wraparound care for busy families. The increase to employers' national insurance alone will cost them £16,000 per year, and they're still struggling with an increase in utility costs. And this is in the context of nurseries in the area struggling and closing. And Headmasters, a hairdresser in Walton, is struggling with £15,000 of extra cost, primarily due to this tax rise. So can the Minister explain to businesses in East Walton how this government's national insurance policy will deliver growth or higher living standards, because it seems to be doing neither?
Mr Speaker, the Government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions was one of the toughest decisions we took at the budget, but it was necessary to restore stability to the public finances, because it is only on the basis of having stable public finances and fiscal responsibility that we can boost investment and growth that will make people across Britain better off.
Mira Wilson.
Very much, Mr Speaker. As the poor growth figures show, the Chancellor's jobs tax is really hurting businesses, not least our hospitality sector. Pubs like the Eel Pie and the King's Head, as well as family-run restaurant Shambles in my constituency, are really struggling with soaring costs, putting off hiring people. So if the Chancellor won't reverse her jobs tax, will she at the very least consider extending the current 75% business rates relief for hospitality until the new system she's announced is in place?
Mr Speaker, the honourable member speaks about business rates relief. We've got to remember, of course, that the business rates relief for retail, hospitality and leisure was due to end entirely in April 2025 under the plans we inherited from the party opposite when we were in government. Despite the tough fiscal context, we decided to extend that relief, that 40%, for another year before the permanently lower rates for retail, hospitality and leisure come in from April 2026.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that planning reform is essential for higher growth and lower taxes? And I'd like to ask, is he, like me, concerned that the anti-growth opposition we see before us in this House will vote against the forthcoming planning and infrastructure bill, possibly the most significant piece of pro-growth legislation this Parliament will see in decades?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he's absolutely right about the centrality of the planning reform to getting the economy growing. Indeed, one of the first actions the Chancellor announced upon taking office was to scrap the ban on onshore wind turbines in the planning system, which have been holding back our clean energy transition. I hope that some of the members of the opposition might take the opportunity during today's questions to confirm they will support our reforms to the planning system, because they are indeed vital to growth in this country.
Bill Leicester.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that it is in the interests of business to see waiting lists in the NHS reduced, to see our roads repaired and to see the public finances fixed? And does he agree that if the parties opposite don't agree with Labour's plans, they should set out how they would pay for these improvements?
My honourable friend is absolutely right that the stability in the public finances are crucial to make sure that we boost investment and growth across the country. And he's also right to point out that having public services which are back on their feet after years of decline under the party opposite being in government is also essential to not only making people in this country healthier, more able to get around and better off, but to getting our economy growing, because it is on that basis that businesses will invest.
Shadow Minister James White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Even before Labour's jobs tax comes into force, we can see the damage it's doing, and 750,000 jobs in hospitality will be subject to employer national insurance for the first time, costing £1 billion. So when major hospitality and retail businesses are warning that the lower paid and part-time workers will suffer most, will the Chancellor think again, and can the Minister at least commit there will be no further increases during this Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, the businesses the honourable gentleman referred to, like businesses in all sectors of the economy, benefit from the stability which this government has brought to the economy. And if he wants to talk about unemployment, if he wants to talk about the rate of jobs, we recognise that the changes to employer national insurance contributions were a tough decision that will have consequences. But the unemployment rate will fall to 4.1% next year and remain low until 2029. And when taken together, the budget measures mean that the employment level in this country will increase from 33.1 million in 2024 to 34.3 million in 2029.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Health and wealth are two sides of the same coin, and we will not get economic growth without a healthy population. But as a result of the National Insurance contribution changes, the Care Provider Alliance reports that 73% of social care providers will have to refuse new care packages from local authorities or the NHS, and 57% will have to hand back existing contracts. Mr. Speaker, what assurances can the government provide to the huge number of people who are very scared that they will have to go without care and see their lives deteriorate?
Good question.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady makes an important point, but it is also important to point out that tough decisions on taxation have to be made to fund those very services which she is keen to support. However, to her point specifically, to support social care authorities to deliver key services in light of the pressures, we announced at the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement a further £200 million for adult and children's social care. This will be allocated by the Social Care Grant, which will bring the total increase in this grant in 25-26 to £880 million, meaning that up to £3.7 billion of additional funding will be provided to social care authorities in 25-26.
Daisy Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, ministers will be aware of analysis from the Nuffield Trust that shows that additional grant has been dwarfed by the additional costs that the government is introducing. But on the Great British High Street, we know that our high streets are beautiful features of our cities, market towns and villages. But hospitality, retail, beauty and other service sectors are saying that the combination of national insurance and other changes will be a real hammer blow. If high street shops start to close, that is bad for economic growth and it's also bad for confidence. So what mechanisms will ministers put in place to monitor the impact of the national insurance contribution changes on the vibrancy and resilience of our high streets?
Well, Mr. Speaker, all measures in the budget were, of course, analysed by the Treasury and the OBR ahead of their announcement, and we keep in constant contact with industry representatives to see how policies are taking place in practice. But I would draw her attention to my earlier remarks to her honourable friend in relation to our business rates reform, which is a vital ask from the retail, hospitality and leisure sector. And after years of chopping and changing from the party opposite, changing reliefs one year to the next, offering no stability whatever to people in that sector, we are introducing permanently lower rates for retail, hospitality and leisure from April 26, and avoiding the complete end of relief that the party opposite left in the in-tray when we arrived in office.
Kevin Bonavia.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I should like to answer this question together with question number 5. The Growth Mission is the central mission of this government and transport an important enabler of that growth. The spending review delivered a £1.1 billion cash increase to the transport budget in 25-26 compared to 24-25, representing a 1.5% real terms growth with record spending. Further announcements will be made in the spending review.
Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, Stevenage Borough Council are working to secure jobs and opportunity with town centre regeneration underway and over 590 council homes delivered. But outdated infrastructure is holding back growth. Businesses have been clear with me that upgrading Stevenage Station Gateway will unlock growth with the prospect of 15,000 jobs